Okay, so the life of somebody trying to bootstrap a hardware startup in his spare time means that it's 9:17 and I'm just now getting to a point where I can start working on whatever I want to work on code-wise for the puck tonight. I've edited a video, have it up at YouTube for publishing tomorrow, so that's all done. So these videos are all kind of a day behind. But anyway, you know, it's after 9 o'clock. I'm just now sitting down to work on firmware. And what I feel like I really need to do, what I was hoping to accomplish in this 2-week sprint period, was to get graphics and stuff figured out and fonts figured out for the screen so I know exactly what I was going to display. But I think I'm going to set that aside because now that I have hardware in hand, I want to verify as many parts of that as I can so that I know if I need to do a revision on the hardware, on the PCB at all. And so I had mentioned before, I briefly mentioned, there's some other things I've hooked up on the PCB that I included in the schematic, which are things that go to different pins on the P1 for things like battery and when it's plugged into USB. I have a PGOOD output from the power, I can't remember which chip it's from, but anyway, there's a couple of other pins that are hooked up to things that I can get information about what's going on physically on the hardware at any given time, and I need to make sure that all those things are working properly. I have no firmware code for any of those things, so what I'm going to do is probably just hack together really quickly in just raw particle, main.ino type stuff, things to verify that those different connections are working correctly and as I would expect. And so that's the plan for tonight. See how far I get. Okay, quick update on the results from testing. So the two things that I have hooked up to the P1 module outside of like the display and all that are outputs from the charging circuitry on our board here. And those two outputs are PGOOD and charge. PGOOD is low when a power source is connected to the micro USB port here and is high otherwise. Charge is a digital low when the charging circuit is active. I had to think about that for a second. When the charging circuit is actively charging the battery, otherwise it is high, according to the data sheet on the part that we're using here. And so I just wrote some simple code to test that to control the RGB LED based on PGOOD being high or low. That looks good. That's working as expected. It's one color when it's not plugged in, and as soon as I plug in my USB cable and attach to my laptop, it changes to a different color. So that input looks to be working correctly on the P1 module. The charge, however, is not working as I would expect it to. So I have these hooked up to, by the way, new thing I learned about the P1, these are hooked up to input pins that I had never heard of before, called P1S4 and P1S5. Very different from the standard D0 through D7 or A0 through A7 that you might be used to. But anyway, the charge is hooked up to, look here, P1S5, 5, and that does not seem to be toggling correctly, higher versus low, based on whether the charging circuit is charging or not. I've tried like 5 batteries on this thing, and all of them it seems to think are fully charged, which I'm almost 100% positive is not true. And so I'm going to reach out to Agility and check that. I really, another thing that I'm running into here is that all of the design files for the project are done in Altium. And for those that don't know, that is like the Cadillac, Mercedes, BMW, whatever you want, the high end, not even that, it's like the Bugatti of layout, schematic, PCB design software. I think like a standard license, like $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 or something like that. And so I can't really look at the PCB layout, like where the pins are going. So I was here with a little magnifying glass trying to look and see where traces go. And so everything seems to be hooked up as it says for the schematic, and which should be correct, the way everything's hooked up from the component. But again, it just doesn't seem like that is displaying correctly. That charge output is displaying correctly. So I'm going to reach out to Agility and see if I can get some more information on what maybe I'm doing wrong there to not be able to read that. But excuse me. But that's it. I think I'm going to call it a night. Verified PGOOD, still looking at charge to see what's up with that. But as soon as I can verify that, that's all of the hardware that needs to be verified, besides a little bit of screen testing, and then we should be pretty good to go from a hardware perspective. So that's what we got done tonight.